Morgan Rogers has joined the biggest club in London, says so the player himself. Last night, Chelsea had a bid for Bournemouth midfielder Alex Scott rejected, worth up to £64 million. And despite Alex Scott wanting to join Chelsea, Bournemouth's stance is that he's absolutely not for sale. After prizing away Morgan Rogers for £117 from Aston Villa, supposedly we're looking at sending them a few players ourselves. Namely, a potential loan deal for Alejandro Garnacho and Nicholas Jackson, potentially for that £65 million price. Axel Disasi finally has a suitor. Roma have made an inquiry and Chelsea have said how much we want for him, but West Ham are also lurking around for the player just in case he doesn't get his move back to Europe. The interest in John Stones has supposedly been ignited after Chelsea were rejected for the approach for Granit Xhaka from Sunderland, and Chelsea have now nearly spent £300 million on Man City Academy graduates. Let's see how they all got on. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And it's transfers at the moment, man. It is all starting to kick off. The window has officially started, so let's get into today's news. First up, I just wanted to look at this for a second. Pice reposted this via Chelsea FC. Rogers says, "I am joining the biggest club in London." Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Give me more of it. It's so good, man. It's so good. Look, Morgan Rogers is a phenomenal player, and I'm so excited that we've signed him because I genuinely think he's going to have a massive impact on the team and level up our attack. But the Arsenal angle is just phenomenal, and for him to add insult to injury to our cross-London rivals like this is absolutely phenomenal. So guys, tell me what you think about the Morgan Rogers signing, and are you just as happy that we're getting a little dig at Arsenal despite them winning the Premier League? But now let's look at some actual news. Pice reposted this via Ben Jacobs and Alex Crook. Chelsea have had a recent approach for Alex Scott rejected. Chelsea were willing to pay over £60 million. So this one kind of came out of nowhere last night, man. I was doing a live stream with the Blue Lounge, and £64 million bid for Alex Scott from Bournemouth was rejected. Really interesting. I was a bit surprised by it anyway, because look, the midfield market is mental at the moment, isn't it? Tonali 100, Mateus Fernandes 85, Elliot Anderson 116, Morgan Rogers 117. So we'd heard earlier in the window that Alex Scott was 80 to 100 mil. So even to go in with a £64 million bid seems a little bit crazy. Also, he's not necessarily the profile of player I thought we'd be looking for in that midfield spot, so I do think that's interesting. But, you know, he definitely looks like a good player. CFC Daily reposted this via The Standard. The Standard Sport understands that while Scott wants to join Chelsea, Bournemouth insist that he is not for sale as they look to tie him down to a new contract. So, interesting part here. Alex Scott wants the Chelsea move, and you've got to have thought, some of this is going to be in response to Morgan Rogers joining, isn't it? I mentioned this before. Chelsea going out and getting Morgan Rogers is about more than just the first team at the end of the day. Chelsea going out and getting Morgan Rogers for the money that we did shows that we are coming in hard for this season and we're not messing around. Other players you will see that Morgan Rogers was convinced by Xabi Alonso when he had Arsenal on the table. Like, the whole story really plays into it, and all of a sudden it makes the proposition very attractive. So Alex Scott is a 22, 23-year-old young midfielder, and yeah, really good season last season in particular. Bournemouth smashed it last season, man. Iraola did such a good job with that squad. But from Bournemouth's point of view, I do kind of get it because, you know, they recently lost Semenyo. Senesi's gone to Tottenham now on a free, which really would have hurt. They've just gotten into Europe as well. Do you know what I mean? So they're in danger of having their team pulled apart in their first European campaign in how long, if not ever? Like, I don't remember the last time Bournemouth got into a European campaign, if they ever did. So I kind of understand it from Bournemouth side, and they're saying that he's not for sale at any price. Do I believe it though? This is very different from the Sunderland Granit Xhaka thing, right? Because Granit Xhaka is worth more than the maximum amount of money anyone would pay for him, which is like even 30 million for Granit Xhaka is wild, isn't it? When you think about Sunderland, also European campaign next season, did really well. And for us to, you know, even if we did something crazy like pay 30 mil for a nearly 34-year-old Granit Xhaka, Sunderland can't replace what Granit Xhaka brings to the team with 30 mil. Now, the difference is with this kind of one, if they value him at 80 to 100 mil, which I don't necessarily think we should pay, but I trust the manager, Bournemouth can use 100 mil. That's very different. You know, you can replace an Alex Scott, or you can upgrade some points on the pitch. You know what I mean? With Senesi needing replacing. If Alex Scott, you know, if you need a new midfielder and a centre-back, you can get 80 to 100 mil for Alex Scott, and you can, you know, with their new manager, you know, you can have a good go at trying to replace that output, can't you? So, like I say, I think it's interesting that Alex Scott wants to join Chelsea, albeit not very surprising, given all of the recent events with the signing of Morgan Rogers and whatnot. But Bournemouth, as of right now, seem to be holding fast. and supposedly were interested in signing him in a new deal. That's where things get a little bit more interesting. Transfer News Live posted this just an hour before I started recording from the Telegraph. Alex Scott has rejected the chance to sign a new contract with Bournemouth. Manchester United and Arsenal are interested, while Chelsea also have been linked with the 22-year-old. Bournemouth insist Scott is not for sale and have not set an asking price despite his 2028 contract. So he's only got 2 years left on his deal. They're in a precarious position now because if he doesn't kick on at Bournemouth next season, this is probably the most he'll ever be worth. And that's the really interesting thing, isn't it? Like, the midfielder market has gone absolutely nuts this summer. Last summer, strikers was the thing. Next summer, you don't necessarily know. There's so many reasons. You don't know if Alex Scott is going to have as good a season under the new manager with a slightly different team as he did this season, which is what's made him worth so much at the moment. We've seen this before, right? When Bayern Munich tried to pay a lot of money for Callum Hudson-Odoi and we said no, and then years and years and years later, we end up, he goes to Nottingham Forest for like 4 mil or whatever it was. Do you know what I mean? So, obviously, it's not a given that Alex Scott's star is going to continue to rise. His potential is based on what he's worth right now. So, with only 2 years left on his deal, they're putting themselves, well, not even 2 years, it's like a year and a half, really, sort of thing, isn't it? Like a season and a half. And, by the end of next season, he'll be able to start thinking about signing on a free with other, seeing his contract out and signing on a free for another team. So Bournemouth are in a precarious position. I do rate the hustle, though. I respect the hustle of them saying, no, absolutely not for sale, because they need to be, at the end of the day, if they don't think they can replace him and they think what he brings to the team is absolutely invaluable for their upcoming European campaign and they want to try and kick on, fair enough. Arsenal probably, so the recent news about Arsenal is supposedly they've now opened talks with Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle. That's going to be a very expensive deal, so I wouldn't necessarily expect them to go in for an Alex Scott after that as well. Manchester United have bought a couple of midfielders, but they had one deal, can't remember the lad's name. I can't remember the lad's name, but I know that they were in for a midfielder. They did the medical and he failed the medical, but still they've got Yuri Tielemans and they've got Andre Santos, obviously. So Alex Scott would be another big expenditure to try and bulk out that midfield. We obviously have our own midfield situations, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And Alex Scott is interested in the Chelsea move, supposedly based on the last tweet that we saw as well. So the question now is do Bournemouth play this game of chicken with Alex Scott? Because we, based on him only having 2 years left on his deal, I don't expect us to go in like we did with Morgan Rogers for 80 to 100 mil for Alex Scott. I don't think that'll happen. 64 mil, maybe it rises to 70, 75, something like that. It's still a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? It's still a lot of money. But I would expect a deal for Alex Scott to be more favourable based on the fact that he doesn't have long left on his contract and is not, at 22, 23 years old, by the time he's 25, he could be a hot property, and if he backs himself, he could then go wherever he wants on a free and earn an absolute bag, because that's normally what happens, isn't it? So, really interesting about the Alex Scott thing. I'll need to look more into the player profile. I didn't have him down as the Granit Xhaka, Adam Wharton, deep-lying distributor type that I thought we might be looking for. So maybe I was wrong about that. It'd be interesting to see. I thought he had a bit more, a bit more of a runner, a bit more of a ball carrier. Let me know if you watched a lot of Bournemouth games last season, what you think of Alex Scott. Do you think that he would be a good addition to the squad, a good partner for Moises Caicedo? And what amount of money do you think would be reasonable to pay for him based on how long he's got left on his contract? And guys, if you've made it this far into today's episode of the Stamford Sync, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so we'll carry on with the midfield a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about Alex Scott and a little bit about Enzo Fernandez. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Ben Jacobs. Chelsea are exploring the midfield market after seeing Alex Scott rejected. Another midfielder arriving is not a guarantee Enzo Fernandez will be sold. Chelsea remain open to Fernandez signing a new contract, but if his 120 million valuation is met, he can go. So, two things to unpack here. We're exploring the midfield market after seeing Alex Scott rejected. Now, as much as I would love to go in for Adam Wharton, he's 100% the guy that I'd choose, and I suspect potentially is the reason why Badad Iqbali is having the conversation with the Crystal Palace owner, because I don't necessarily think it's just about Maxence Lacroix. I think they might be discussing Adam Wharton as well. But if we're bidding for Alex Scott at the moment for 64 mil, that says that maybe we don't want another £100 million midfielder. or we can't go out and do that kind of thing. So maybe we're looking for a bit of a cheaper alternative, which is interesting. Manu Kone of Roma has been mentioned, which is interesting as well, because albeit it looks like we're going to get onto Garnacho in a minute, he might be on his way to Aston Villa on loan. There's still the option of Diego Moreira, which we have the buyback clause for. There's still potentially some sort of deal to be done with Roma as well. Manu Kone could be an option for that, someone we've been linked with recently. And yeah, so that would be a lot cheaper than an Adam Wharton. The other thing here is the Enzo Fernandez angle, right? I think it's really interesting. Another midfielder is not a guarantee. Enzo Fernandez will be sold. Chelsea remain open to Fernandez signing a new contract, but if it's 120 million valuation is met, he can go. So Enzo Fernandez, we're going to go for this midfielder regardless of whether Enzo Fernandez stays or goes. We're not looking at a one-in, one-out situation. Obviously, if someone comes in for him for the money that we want, then he'll be allowed to leave. And what that kind of says to me is we don't see Enzo Fernandez as that midfielder. And I've kind of been saying this for a little while. As a deep midfielder, I don't really see Fernandez being the option. I think it made sense when we were inverting fullbacks into midfield because you essentially still had 2 6s in front of a back 3, which allowed Enzo Fernandez to spend more time getting forward. Enzo Fernandez can't do that in a situation where we don't have another guy inverting into the midfield, because then what you do is leave Moises Caicedo very, very isolated, and Enzo Fernandez, we haven't seen much of him just as a deep lying number 6, do you know what I mean? So for me, if we do the 3-4-2-1, Enzo Fernandez makes sense in the Morgan Rogers role, essentially the half space 10 as kind of a rotational option. But outside of that, I'm not just really sure how it's going to be used. That's going to be really interesting. I do think there's still a chance he could be sold, and I'm less and less convinced that we'll hold out for the 120 mil now either. Enzo Fernandez's stock has risen and fallen at the same time, kind of after the last few World Cup games, right? The goal against England, absolutely phenomenal. The goal against Egypt, these goals showcase why he's so valuable, because he'll fight to the last minute, and especially when it comes to scoring goals, he's obviously really useful. But also, didn't cover himself in glory outside of being a footballer, like an actual, just the tactical side of the game. And obviously there's been all the twerking for Real Madrid. The attitude is obviously a thing. Like, he literally tried to throw Marco Correa under the bus, who was literally done the only thing he could to try and facilitate the move for Enzo Fernandez by coming out in the media, said, yes, I'd love to see him at Real Madrid as well. So it's a bit weird with Enzo Fernandez, but at this point, personally, if we could get 100 mil for him, I'd be like, yeah, cool, just let him go at this point. I really just want to rebuild the squad, and I don't necessarily want Enzo Fernandez to be part of that, but I do also appreciate that he has very definable qualities when it comes to goal scoring, right? So really interesting one. Let me know what you think about the Enzo Fernandez situation in the comments. Right, next up, Alejandro Garnacho. CFC Daily posted this. Alejandro Garnacho is closing in on a loan move to Aston Villa. Unai Emery is understood to be convinced he can revive his career. So it's always a strange conversation about Alejandro Garnacho in the grand scheme of things, because, look, none of us are happy with his performance. 8 goals, 4 assists across the entire season in 30 to 40 appearances is not amazing. He didn't do particularly well for us. It's quite obvious that Chelsea are looking to get rid of him, because he's been, we've literally been like putting it out there in the press for the last couple of weeks. We want to sell Alejandro Garnacho. As far as him going to another team, he's 22 years old. He's still so young. It's wild, absolutely wild. Like, he can 100% reignite his career somewhere, and there is talent there. So I find it interesting that Unai Emery is saying, yeah, I can get a tune out of Garnacho. As a Chelsea fan, if we get Rodgers and offload Garnacho, that's look, the money, Aston Villa will be happy with £117 million for Morgan Rodgers. Of course they will. But if we're able to use Garnacho to facilitate that move and get him over there, that'd be hilarious, man. I'd absolutely love it. A bit more interesting context on the Garnacho to Villa situation. CFC Daily posted this via The Athletic. Villa and Chelsea have to be careful around any obligations included in the deal. Per UEFA, if a condition is considered to be virtually certain, clubs must record loan deals as permanent ones at the point the loan takes place. The conditions included in the Garnacho deal must have a realistic possibility of not occurring in order for the deal to be recorded, at least initially, as a loan. So, red tape, man, red tape with this loan. Basically, what this is saying is that if we loan Garnacho to Aston Villa and say something like, I'll just be ridiculous, if he makes 1 appearance, then he becomes an Aston Villa player. But and obviously that's a very hyperbolic version of it. But in that essence, it would be recorded as a permanent transfer straight away, and the money would be recorded on this year's books, I'm assuming. So in order for this to be really considered a loan with an obligation to buy, the conditions have to be possible to not happen, right? So it needs to be something like Garnacho has to make 20 appearances, 25 appearances, first team appearances, something where it's like he could not do that. Do you know what I mean? If Garnacho gets injured or just isn't fancied by the manager, then it's very easy for that obligation not to happen. Similar to what happened with the Nicholas Jackson situation at Bayern Munich. They had a 42 appearance clause. Now, that was never going to happen. That was completely the other way, in the opposite direction. But, with this one, it needs to be, we can't just say, basically they want the player, but they don't want to pay for him now. They want to pay for him next season. But we can only make it that way if the obligations in the contract are seen as reasonable, essentially. And like I say, not just, if he makes 2 appearances and scores 1 goal, then it's, then it happens. So interesting that this just kind of speaks more and more to the relationship that Aston Villa have with Chelsea, where we are looking to help each other out financially all of the time. And that's probably because we both keep getting in trouble with UEFA about overspending, right? So Aston Villa, Unai Emery seems convinced that he can do something with Alejandro Garnacho. I'm all here for it. I know a lot of Villa fans aren't happy at the moment. I watched Gabby Abonglahor on TalkSport, earlier talking to Rory Jennings about it. He's not a fan. Rory Jennings obviously not a fan. But I do genuinely believe that Alejandro Garnacho is one of those players that can reignite his career because he's 22 years old. There's still more maturing to do as a footballer, as a person. I'm not necessarily saying he can be the next Ronaldo, but he could be a 10 to 15 goal a season player if he finds the right manager, and Unai Emery might be that guy. Next up, we're sticking with Aston Villa, but we're going to talk a little bit about Nicholas Jackson. Chelsea Dodgers reposted this via Sam J. Dean and Telefootball. Chelsea could sell Nicholas Jackson to Aston Villa. So that was 2 hours ago. That is all it says. But again, this kind of makes sense because we were talking about this last summer. Like, we were talking about, it's not a swap deal because swap deals aren't really a thing, but essentially we buy Morgan Rogers, you buy Nicholas Jackson. We got our hands slapped by UEFA because they said we're not allowed to value the players at what we valued them at. UEFA are always sticking their oar in, man. They absolutely hate any time that Chelsea and Aston Villa are doing deals together. UEFA are always like, whoa, they don't like it because we keep getting in trouble with them. Do you know what I mean? So we've really got we're under the magnifying glass for UEFA to make sure we're not going to get in any more trouble. Nicholas Jackson has played for Unai Emery before and would be interesting for, and you got to think as well, Ollie Watkins is in his 30s now. I don't know who their the rotational option for striker is, but at the same time, it's just one of those, isn't it? Jackson is actually a reasonably hot property in the grand scheme of things if you think about it. And I know, look, don't come at me in the comments. I'm not saying he's amazing, but he's a young striker with Premier League experience. He won a league with Bayern Munich last year and played some sort of part in that as well. So in terms of the striker market, there's probably not many strikers in and around Jackson's level who, albeit frustrating, can get 10 plus goals in a season. In the Premier League, which we've seen twice. So that's going to be interesting. And look, as with Garnacho, Unai Emery knows Jackson, well, actually a bit different, but Unai Emery knows Jackson really well, but also probably backs himself in order to improve Jackson because he already knows the kind of player that he is, and I assume he was the one that transitioned him into a striker in the first place. That I'm not sure about. It'd be really interesting to find out. But Nicholas Jackson, personally, I'd still be quite happy to keep him as a backup rotational option. I was thinking before that he had a much more of an opportunity to get game time, but the Morgan Rogers deal kind of puts a bit of an end to that, really. Not saying that he won't get any game time, but I now don't think he's got a realistic chance of pushing himself into the first team. He would have to rely on injury or horrible patches of form for either João Pedro, Cole Palmer or Morgan Rogers. And I'm not convinced that's going to happen, man, to be completely honest. If we can get £65 million for Jackson, I think that'd be great. That will help us invest in other areas of the squad that we still need to improve. Like I say, I'd still be quite happy to keep him around, but if Aston Villa are willing to, over half of the Morgan Rogers money for Nicholas Jackson, definitely a risk from the Chelsea fans' perspective. But again, if Unai Emery thinks that he can do something with him, then that is what it is. Right, next up, Axel Disasi, and finally, there is some potential suitors. Pies posted this via Santi JFM. Roma have asked about Disasi. Chelsea would like £17 million. Cool. That's even actually a little bit less than I thought we'd try and sell him for, but what that says is we just want him gone. Roma will try and pay less than that. Of course they will. Italian teams do not have as much money as we do. But yeah, 17 million. I don't even really care about the money for Disasi. I think I feel very much the same about the likes of Benoit Badiashile as well. We just need to get these players out, man. We need to free up the room in the squad, and we need to, squad cost ratio and just, room for more players. Josh Achiampong, all this kind of thing. It just makes sense. But there is another suitor, supposedly. Chelsea Dodgers posted this via ex-West Ham United employee via West Ham Central. Axel Disasi is a key target for West Ham this summer, but he's currently holding out for interest in France or Italy. Should Disasi not move to any of those teams, West Ham will try again. So that's actually kind of phenomenal news, isn't it? Because what that is basically saying is there's a club. There is a club for Axel Disasi. At the end of the day, yes, West Ham have gone down to the Championship, but you would have thought realistically, they're keeping Jared Bowen, for instance. Jared Bowen is going to tear it up in the Championship, isn't he? Absolutely wild. They'll come straight back up. And Axel Disasi might have to spend a season out of the Premier League, but surely that's better than spending half a season not playing and then half a season on loan somewhere. At the end of the day, if he goes to West Ham, which is kind of his worst case scenario, because he wants to move to Europe, obviously I'm sure he'd rather go to Roma, but if Roma aren't up for paying the money and West Ham are, then that's probably what will happen, isn't it? So yeah, I think that's just good news for us, because it kind of says, albeit it hasn't happened yet, it's a matter of when, not if, because West Ham are quite happy to see if Axel Disasi gets to move somewhere else, and if he doesn't, then they'll come back in for him. Right, just a couple of little things to finish off with. First, Chelsea Dodgers posted this via Sam J. Dean and Telefootball. Chelsea have shown a willingness to change their youth-focused transfer policy in this window and are considering older players who are ready-made for the Premier League. Interest in Stones comes after they failed in their attempts to sign Granit Xhaka. So, I think this is an interesting one, because it shows you Xabi Alonso wants to bring an experienced player into the squad, an older player into the squad with some, Premier League experience, leadership quality, whatever you want to call it. And I find it interesting that John Stones is essentially the Granit Xhaka alternative, even though they play different positions. It does make sense. I don't expect John Stones to play a huge amount if we do bring him in. I think it's a really good idea to bring him in, but I just thought this was really interesting, and it does show you that the youth-focused thing. Look, Morgan Rogers, 23, Marco Palestra, 21. So the only two signings we've made so far are relatively young ones. We've been negotiating with Pep Chivadia, who's 28, and obviously we looked at Granit Xhaka, and now we're looking at John Stones. So at the end of the day, it's half and half, right? I never expected them to abandon the youth-focused policy completely, but supplementing the squad with older experienced players, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I'm totally here for it. And we're going to finish up with something a little bit strange. Transfer News Live posted this. Chelsea have spent £291 million on Manchester City Academy products. Over a third of that is Morgan Rogers. So Morgan Rogers, £117 million. Romeo Lavia, £53 million. Jamie Gittins, £48.5 million. Cole Palmer, £42.5 million. Liam Delap, £30 million. Tosin Adarabioyo, free. So this is Joe Shields' body of work, essentially. Now, I'm sure he's had, more involvement in other players, and I'm sure there's, I don't know, to be fair, there's so many sporting directors that literally could be the case. But thus far, Joe Shields' involvement in Chelsea's transfer business has been bringing all of these academy products. And look, it doesn't make for great reading in the grand scheme of things. Look, Morgan Rogers, I think, is going to kick on. Cole Palmer, absolutely, obviously brilliant, and phenomenal season, and hopefully can get back to his best. Romeo Lavia, still loads of promise, but hasn't played a 90 minutes for Chelsea ever, and has really struggled to stay fit. Jamie Gittins, loads of money. Didn't absolutely set the world on fire, although he did start looking better towards just before he got his injury, but then spent the whole season injured. Liam Delap, tragic. Absolutely tragic. So far, it's just been bad. Market opportunity gone wrong. Tosin Adarabioyo, free transfer. Yeah, okay, we didn't spend any money on that, but we're paying the guy's wages. And look, it's not been great, has it? Let's be honest. Like, he's had some good games, but he's had some really terrible games as well. So I want to know what you guys think of Joe Shields' body of work. I don't necessarily think that Joe Shields had loads to do with the Morgan Rogers thing, by the way, because every single team in the Premier League knew how good Morgan Rogers was. That wasn't Joe Shields being like, we should get this guy because he was good in the academy. It's like, bro, he's literally like won the Europa League. He's gotten into England's World Cup squad. He's got like over 20 GA, was it? Last season, nearly 20 GA last season for Aston Villa. He's, you know, it's like everyone knew about Morgan Rogers. Cole Palmer, fair enough. Like, it was a bit of a fluke maybe, but, you know, fair enough with that one. Liam Delap hasn't worked out. Tyson Darabioyo hasn't worked out. Jamie Gittins thus far hasn't worked out. Romeo Lavia so far hasn't worked out. So guys, let me know, do you think Joe Shields is on thin ice? Do you think that he might be, if we start culling the sporting director soon, do you think he might be one of the ones to go? Or do you look at the other angle where Romeo Lavia and Jamie Gittins, if they can get over their injury worries, potentially they become big players for the squad, and then all of a sudden this list looks a lot different? Nice one, guys. I'm going to start wrapping it up there, but I want to know what you think about everything that we've talked about today, starting with Morgan Rogers saying that he's come to the biggest club in London. Absolutely love that. Alex Scott, 64 mil. Do you think Alex Scott's the player that we need? How much would you go up to for him? Do you think it's interesting that we're still going to go for a midfielder even if we keep Enzo Fernandez? And if that is the case, where do you think Enzo Fernandez is going to play? Alejandro Garnacho to Aston Villa, with the whole UEFA thing, making sure that we do the deal nicely and, you know, don't take the mick with it or whatever. How do you feel about Garnacho potentially going to Aston Villa, as well as potentially Nicholas Jackson? Axel Disasi finally has suitors, and like I said, it feels like a when, not an if. £17 million is what we want for him. He wants a European move, but West Ham are willing to wait to see what happens. Do you think Chelsea have truly changed their policy with us looking at older players? Personally, I think it really looks like it. And how would you rate Joe Shields' involvement in Chelsea at the moment with 300 mil on Man City Academy graduates? Nice one, guys. I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.